be great. I love what you posted just like an hour ago about like our sensitivities should be like, honored. What did you say? However you said it was just like so good.
Celebrated.
Yeah, celebrated. Oh my
Yeah.
God, it's so should be celebrated.
It's so hard because like, well, you know, because you're highly sensitive and so am I. It takes a while to figure out that you are. You just know
Mm-hmm.
you feel out of place. And then when I finally found the lane air and I have opened other people's eyes. I had a lady in her 70s who I said, I think you're a highly sensitive person. I think you should look. She wasn't even my patient, it was her husband. And she just was talking about her struggles. I said, read this book. And she came and she's like, that changed my life
Mm-hmm.
in her
See, it's
70s.
so funny. Yeah, that's so it's so like eye-opening. So I like literally haven't even read a book about being highly sensitive or like an
Really?
empath. No, I
What's
haven't.
wrong with
Like
that?
I know, like my sister, she probably like 5 years ago, because both of my sisters are the same. They're both really sensitive. And she like 5 years ago was looking into something and was like, oh my gosh, did like one of those tests and got like some super high score. And so she sent it to me. She's like, you have to take this. Like she's like, it answered so many questions for me. And so I did, and I was reading it, and it was just, it's so weird because you're going through life and you just think like, this is how I am, and
Yeah.
then like when you are sensitive, like sometimes, then when people tell you like, oh, you're too sensitive, then you kind of like, you don't like share as much, or you don't let on that things are, necessarily like affecting you as much. So then it kind of becomes like that, like a little bit of like armor, or you can't really like tap into the truest version of yourself, right? Because you feel like you can't be authentic sometimes and sharing how much something is impacting you. But yeah, when
Right.
she sent me that, I was just like, oh wow, this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if how it was for you, but like for me, not only it's not just like sensitive to necessarily like energies and like people's emotions and everything, but like obviously there's like the sights and like sound and things like that can be overwhelming. But for me, I have also like a lot of food sensitivities and
Okay.
things like that, and both of my sisters do also. And so I feel like there's like a little bit that goes hand in hand with that too, because it's like our food is energy also, right? And so like there's energy in
Right.
like the food and everything. And so I think that would be really cool to see too. Like I wonder how many other people are like highly sensitive or like an empath, or any of those things, to see how they are with foods and things like that, because everything is energy, and so we're all, it's like all just information that we're taking in. But
Right. And we're very, I think, susceptible to being, if we're in the wrong place, it's going to affect us a lot more
mhm.
around negative energies where, and I'm sure you can relate to this where you're in an environment and you're like, why is nobody seeing this? Like this person's awful to everyone and everyone's just like, they're fine, and you're like, I can't understand it,
Yeah.
they can blow it off and you can't. You're like very
Mhm.
sensitive to like injustice or people being treated poorly or and they do, they're like, oh, you're just too sensitive, and so then you walk around for a long time thinking it's your fault,
Mhm.
there's something wrong with you, although deep down that's not true. And so eventually I think when you realize that you notice more things,
Absolutely.
our neurological system is just picks up on a lot more. It's
Yeah.
working harder and picking up on more subtleties, and so we do need more time to process and to like discharge all that. We get more overwhelmed. So I can walk
Yeah.
in a room and like I'll find the sad person like that. It's just I'm very in tune with like people's body language. And but yeah, I think there are a lot of different variations of it. Some people are more sensitive to sounds and noises, and it can be all of the above, but it can also be certain things bother you more than others. Like I don't like tight clothing. I have to have the remote when I'm watching a TV or movie, because when it gets really loud, it drives me insane. But then you can't hear the people talk, so you have to turn it back up. So like I'm kind of like fanatical about that. Like, so there's just little things but I think instead of beating yourself up for them, you can just like accept like this is how I am and it's okay. And there's a flip
Yeah,
side to it. There's
absolutely.
a lot of good that comes from it. You're going to notice things that maybe others miss. We tend to be
Yeah.
more creative, more understanding, more in tune with, we appreciate beauty and animals and all those things. So yeah.
Yeah. And that's,
Go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but
No, no,
like
no, go
I
ahead.
just, one of my friends she's also an equine guided practitioner as well. We were just talking about the other day, and I was saying, don't you feel like it's like a benefit in our line of work because we are so in tune? And so not only are we so in tune with like what the horses are up to in a session, but also what's going on for the person. And she just like the way she said it, she's like, yeah, when you can like use it wisely and mindfully, then
Yes.
like you see it as like more of a gift, And so that's where it's like learning that there's nothing wrong with you, because it can feel like a lot. Like I remember like because growing up I just was like, oh my gosh, like there's 5 kids in my family and they're like a lot of big energies, and I didn't know it at the time, but like I was totally, like absorbing some of those. And I would spend so much time outside with the animals because we grew up on a ranch, and that was like where I go to be by myself. Like I would go and be with the horses, or we had rabbits, and like I would just go away from everyone because I just needed that time to myself. And so I learned at a really young age like what I needed. And then also um I think I ended up creating like my own boundaries, like energetically with different people in my family. But then when I got married, it was like the lines blurred and I didn't have those same energetic boundaries. And I know you know a little bit about my story, but like my husband has, struggled with post-traumatic stress. And so I wasn't aware of like how much it was impacting me until like I was at work one day and my supervisor said to me, she's like, I just never know what version of you I'm going to get today. And I was like, oh, like, what do you mean? And she's like, some days you're just like super bubbly, and other days she's like, I don't want to use like the word depressed, but like some days you seem just like really depressed. And I was like, whoa, like I would never use that word to describe myself, So I really started becoming aware of like what was shifting for me, like why was I acting a certain way each day? And then I realized it was like totally dependent on like what my husband was kind of going through in that day. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is a problem. Like I really gotta, step up like my boundaries that I have with him and like what I'm allowing in and everything. And so that was when I really started like diving into different practices that I could implement for myself, because it was like actually kind of becoming like a problem to the point where like my supervisor like mentioned something to me, and she was someone I respected, and so I obviously like took it and then was like, I really need to look at this. So yeah, and then like through the years, just like all the things that I've done with like energy work and then like ancestral clearing, and people often ask me during like group things or after, like, how can you do this kind of work? Aren't you like taking on everybody's stuff? And I'm always like, no, I'm not, because I have such a practice for myself. And so, yeah, I'm feeling a lot. But once you know like the difference, and that's like a huge thing, right? Is the discernment. Like I know it's not mine what I'm feeling, and so I don't have to take it on, because there's a difference between being like a sponge and like taking something on, because taking something on from somebody else means that now it's become yours and now you have to do so much more processing and all of that, right? Where
Right.
when it's just something that you're feeling, like you've probably had where like how you said you walk into a room and you can spot a sad person, but like you walk into a room and you're like, wow, I'm feeling so like joyful, and maybe I was feeling something else, and then you realize, oh yeah, there's these other people who are feeling like that same way, and then you go to the next room and then it's like, right, and it can be
Yeah.
totally different like that fast for you. And so
Yeah.
like that's like the difference of like absorbing and like moving it through, then like, oh, now I have this heavy thing and now it's mine, and now I have to figure out like how to
Yeah.
move through that and everything. So that's been a huge thing in my life, is like that, really practicing that discernment and like what is mine, and like really knowing myself.
Yes. Yes. So tell us about your journey and how you got there, and how, like, when you realized with your husband that this was an issue, how did you start implementing boundaries? What was your first step at that point?
Yeah, so I really started working on like that discernment piece, and like really feeling into like I would like wake up in the morning because he worked night shift, so I always woke up earlier than him. And then I would see like, how am I feeling right now? Like what is my mood, like what's my like tone of energy, and how am I feeling about moving through the day? And so that was, I would do like my first like morning check-in, because then when he would wake up, then I'd interact with him, and then it would like things would shift for me, right? So
Yeah.
I started by doing like that kind of check-in. And then I started noticing like, okay, then when he does wake up and we are interacting, what's shifting for me, and like how am I feeling different now? And so it was really a lot of putting into like practice, like having a really strong awareness practice for like what was going on within me. And I think I've always been really connected to my body, like, and how I'm feeling on like a somatic level. And so really, like really feeling into like, okay, what is my body telling me right now? And like really getting comfortable with that. And so I think that was like, the first part of like that practice for me was really practicing on like the awareness and knowing what was mine and then what was his. And I
Right.
didn't really have a practice yet for like, okay, now if I am feeling what's his, like what do I do with that, you know? So that took a little bit. But then I found all of these different, you know, like methods and everything. And then once I started doing the ancestral clearing work, because I've done so much work on myself, like the cleaner you are, it's
Yes.
like there's less to stick, you know?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Because we're just like mirroring other people and we're always like frequency matching. So a lot of times when we think we're taking on someone's stuff, is really like we have something within us that's a very similar frequency. And so it's really like almost triggering that a little bit. And so then it feels like we've taken something on from somebody else, but
Yeah.
really it's a little piece that was within us that maybe we weren't aware of. And
Right.
so that's why, that's where it's like, oh, okay, like I'm going to show you this now because like here's this mirror, right?
Right. And I feel like too, like we wouldn't even recognize it if we didn't have it within us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, I mean, not, I mean, we see patterns out there as well, but a lot of it is our own stuff that we're like, maybe we haven't dealt with. So like if I
Yeah.
see something that I've already dealt with, I can recognize and go, oh, okay, it doesn't really trigger me.
Mm-hmm.
If something's triggering me and bothering me, then I know there's some issues there that I need to work on.
Yeah, for sure. It's just like how you could be in like you could have like a mutual friend and like there could be three of you say, and like that third person could make you like feel triggered in a certain way when they do like a certain facial expression, but the other person's totally fine, right? And they're like, no,
Right.
there's nothing wrong with that because it's not that's not in them. Like it doesn't remind them of something from their past or whatever it is, you know?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I think just starting to ask the questions is like a great starting
Mm-hmm.
point for people because a lot of times we just accept our thoughts and our feelings as facts and truths. And like
Yes.
when we just started like asking the question, like, where's this coming from? Eventually we get the answer. If we keep
Mm-hmm.
asking, you know, it may take some time and it may come up in pieces and stages, but depending on how resistant we are to knowing, but in time it comes
Yeah.
up. So yeah, it's amazing how, and then you get better at it with practice, just like anything, right? So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. For sure. And yeah, it's just like I love that. Like it's for sure. I always say like we need to ask better questions, right? It's like instead of the ones that are like, because what's wrong with me is kind of it's not an empowering question, you know? And that's kind of where we start once you kind of realize like, oh wow, there isn't something wrong with me. And now I know that, you know, these things kind of like fit into like a little box, you could say, right? Like, oh, I am a highly sensitive person or I am an empath. And so it makes more sense. Um, and so it's like we go from like that, like what's wrong with me to then like asking the more like empowering question of like, okay, what's this trying to show me, you know,
right,
instead. Yeah.
right. So how do you help people with this? Would you say your go-to, like you get somebody, they just realize they're a highly sensitive or they've known a little bit, but they're trying to learn more. What do you tell them?
Yeah. So the first thing I like to look at is like what someone's story is around it because our story has a lot of power.
Mhm.
And so that would be where we would start because like, yes, I'm not a person who likes to use a lot of labels or things like that. Just in general, even when I'm working with somebody in ancestral clearing, you know, they'll say like, oh, I'm feeling really anxious right now. And I'll be like, okay, well, that's kind of a label. Like it's probably true, right? But we want to see like what's deeper than that, you know?
I
And so I
remember you
do
doing
that
that.
same thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So I do that same thing with like when someone says like, oh, I'm an empath or oh, I'm highly sensitive, right? It's like, okay, awesome. That's great that that's there, but like, let's look like what's deeper than that. So really starting with like, what's your story around that? And like, what does that mean for you? And what does that mean in your day to day? Because that's super important to know because the things like the stories we tell ourselves, that has a big impact for how we're like going through life. And then we start working on practices for like discernment. And I feel like discernment and boundaries, and then also knowing where you're losing your energy like kind of all go hand in hand, because you need to be aware of yourself and like what's going on within you, but also like you can't really know where you need to set your boundaries until you know where you're losing your energy. And so really taking a look at that, and I've learned some really cool practices through the years that really help you to see like, wow, this is where I'm losing my energy. And it might not be even a place that you thought of, because some of them are like really subtle. And then other ones are huge, right? So it's like, oh, I'm watching the news and this super disturbing thing is on and now I feel queasy, and you're just, now you're like, wow, now I have a lot of work to do around this, right? And so like that's an easier one to see, right? Like I'm losing my energy to this. And so some people, just need to stop watching certain kinds of television or like news. And yeah, I don't even watch the news anymore. I'm like, I'll get it from like unbiased,
Yep.
sources. I'm not going to get all the fluff. I just want the facts,
Yeah.
So like things like that, right? Like knowing where your energy is kind of like leaving you, if you will. And then that's where then you can start like setting boundaries. So for some people, it might be like setting boundaries with somebody in their life who, because I know like probably for you, because you're sensitive also, like you're probably the person a lot of people come to, right? With like their problems, and random people at the grocery store will turn around and like tell you their life story.
I know.
Cool.
So true. And they'll be like, why did I just tell you this? I haven't talked about this in 30 years. Like,
yeah, you're like, no worries, it happens all the time.
I just bring it out.
Yeah. So it's like knowing, like, so then sometimes you have to set like stronger boundaries with friends, because there will be, some friends who want to like come to you with all their things, and then they feel great, right? Because they've just dumped it all on you, and you're like, cool, now I'm holding all of this. So for some people, it's like, okay, I need to set a boundary and say, you know what, like, I don't really have the bandwidth to talk about this today, or, maybe however it feels right for that person, so there's like the boundaries. And then really there's like some really cool practices like that go with the discernment for like checking in. And then when you do feel something, like when you have that discernment, then you're like, oh yeah, this isn't even mine, I'm just feeling something. And then it just like moves on through, because when you're like feeling it and then you kind of start freaking out and you're like, where's it coming from, oh my gosh, is this mine? Then that's kind of like, I feel like a more constricting sort of energy. And so then we can sort of like hold on to it for longer, where if we're just like open and curious, and we're just like, oh, that's interesting that this is what I'm feeling, I wonder where that's coming from, just like that curiosity and openness is
Curiosity, I think, is huge. Just being curious about your feelings, and because we're so used to being afraid of certain feelings, that when they come up, we just push them away or distract. And I still have certain areas in my life where I do that. And so the more resistant we are, the worse it is, right? So like just being curious, and when it comes up, instead of that, when we start to feel that fright, just go, okay, well, what is this? Why is this here? Asking the question instead of getting freaked out. Like training ourselves that, oh, okay, I can tolerate discomfort. Like, why is this discomfort? Why is this here? Let's figure this out. So, and I really like when I'm at work or around people and I start to get that kind of overwhelm, I just imagine like the energy is being blocked, or whatever gets in is just going through. It's just like a mental, it's like a mental piece, and it helps. As opposed, it's like, okay, I may absorb some of this, but I'm gonna let it pass through. I'll go out with my tree or nature and kind of like ask nature to take it from me. That's a new thing I'm doing, and that really seems to help too.
Yeah, and that's like, because nature is so grounding, right? And like we're coming into more of like that that more like regulated space when we're in nature, and like our heart rate slows, and like we're not like as up here, and like we can drop into our body more. So then like one of my teachers, I remember her saying like, you can give anything back to the earth, like she knows what to do with it. And so like and so that was where she was like, it doesn't matter what it is, because it's all just energy. So even if it was something for you that felt like negative or yucky or whatever it was, like if you imagine giving that back to the earth and just telling the earth like, send this energy where like it's needed, and it will like transmute and send it where it needs to go.
Yes, I love that. I never heard it put that way. Actually, I talked to my tree. I started that with Natalie Calzadia, and like that was a message one day. It was like, just give it to me, I'll take it. And then I started thinking about how they take our carbon dioxide and we take their oxygen. It's like this symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
And like, just give it to me, you know, it all gets used. I know what to do with it. So very much like, but it was just, I didn't read it in a book or anything. It was just like this connection with the tree that I had. And it would have sounded weird to me 5 years ago, but when you do it, and it seems so natural and normal and helpful. So I just,
Yeah.
it's really helpful to go to earth and just say, take it, please take it. So I love that. So what did you say? The earth knows what to do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So what else? So you kind of naturally found like nature and animals as a way to deal with your sensitivity. It's kind of always a natural. Do you continue to do that as well?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have to, like, I was helping with somebody with some things a couple weeks ago, and I was like on the computer a lot, and I was just like, oh my God, like I feel my life force like draining away. And I had to like every day go and make sure that I was like out. And like for me, I like to go places that feel like really wild. And we have a couple of beaches a little bit north of us that like barely anybody ever like go to. And like some of them are kind of dangerous to like swim at and stuff, because they're just like, and I love going there because it just feels like so raw and like, I don't know, there's just like so much power there. And so those are kind of like my go-to places. Or then, you know, I have my horses and stuff, and they're just like so amazing. And so I could just like go out and be with the horses, and then I automatically just like start feeling better, and you know, just like letting go of things. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what else do you feel like is really important?
For sure grounding and like centering. And I really think just like how we were saying before, like that discernment piece, like that's so huge. So like for someone to have like a grounding practice that you do multiple times, like a day, whatever it is. For some people, you know, they'll do like where they do like roots going down to the earth. But for some people that feels weird, and they're like, I don't ever feel grounded like that. So everyone kind of has to find their own thing that makes them feel like grounded and solid. And then like a practice of like really coming into your body instead of being like up here and outside, like really into your body. Cause it's like we spend so much time in our heads anyways, but like really connecting in with your body and like knowing where you are, and like having that check-in like a few times a day, especially when you are like interacting with people more and everything like that. Because then you know, like, okay, this is my baseline, kind of like how I was saying I would do like in the morning. Like I would be like, okay, this is my baseline. This is where I am. Now I can see like what happens from here, you know, because we will end up like going back into like those spaces that like feel comfortable for us, like with our body. But when we're in that space, then we're like losing opportunity for like a new story, kind of, right? Because our body will go into like this old story. So like knowing, okay, like I'm centered and I'm feeling open, not necessarily I'm open for everybody's energy to like come into me, not like that, but just like I'm open for like new possibility, and like having like that center. And then seeing like, okay, something happened, maybe I'm feeling triggered by somebody, maybe I feel like I've like picked up on something from somebody else, like really coming back in, like checking with yourself and like your body and everything. Like I think that those practices are super important, and it feels like a lot when you're first starting, but then like I feel like for me it's just like a snap now, because I've been doing it for like so many years, you know. And
Right.
so then it just, that's when you get to the point where you've really like embodied the practices and you don't even have to think about them.
Right.
And
I'm
then you
smart.
have like, yeah, it's part of you, and you have like less resistance then too, because like I know some people, they have like that little like rebellious inner child within them, and then they're in like a stinky place, and yeah, and you're like, I don't want to do the practice, and you're like, I know all these practices, why am I not implementing them, right? Because like there's that part of you that's, you know, maybe like a 5-year-old who's throwing a tantrum is like, no, I don't want to do it, you know.
That's right.
So when we have the practices and we do them, not just when we're feeling off or when we feel like we've taken something on, right? Like it's like having a toddler who has temper tantrums, right? So if you have practices that you teach them for like, okay, when we're feeling like we want to start screaming or throwing things, whatever their go-to is, like you practice it before the tantrum, otherwise they can't implement it, right? So like having those practices when you are calm, that way then when you are off, you're like, oh yeah, I need to do this. So it's just like having that like compassion for yourself too, because it's like we're not going to get it right all the time, especially when we're first starting out. Like I think a lot of us, especially as adults, we think like, oh, I need to get it right like the first time and like have it perfect, but it's like, no, it's a practice, like literally a life practice.
Right.
Like, and so it's like, it's okay, you're going to have slip ups, but we just keep practicing. That way, when we are like in one of those more challenging spaces, we can implement it and like come back to a centered space and grounded instead of feeling like so overwhelmed and like out here and, kind of like losing it. So like having that practice to like come back in and feel centered.
And I would say like for me, I am very inconsistent. I grew up with no structure. We moved around all the time. And it's been really valuable in a lot of ways because I know how to adapt to new environments. I know how to adapt to different people. I can go with the flow. Plans change, it's fine. But the flip side is I have a hard time being focused and staying on top of things and like bringing things to fruition. I have a million ideas. I start something and then I'm like, oh, let's look over here. Like, and I know sometimes the things to do, but getting myself to do them. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's harder. So like, do you have any tips for people like me that like, how do you keep yourself? I find if I have like other people to help be accountable to, it's easier than just being accountable to myself.
Yeah. And so you have to know for yourself, right? Like, do I feel accountable to myself? And if you don't, then like you need to have an accountability buddy who like will hold your feet to the fire, right? Like it can't just be like your friend who's going to be like, oh, Jessica, it's okay. Like you're doing so great. Like just go easy on yourself. It's like, no, like you need to find the person who's going to be like, Jessica,
get it.
No, like you said you were going to do this. It might be scary, but like you need to do it, right? And then sometimes like there's a reason why we're not doing the thing that we want to do, right? Because part of it might feel scary or like, it's like new, it's unknown. And so like that always feels like to our mind's like, no, not the unknown,
Right. Yeah. And I think definitely for me, it's that defiant inner child too. Like if you tell me I need to do it, I don't want to do it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I have that too.
You have that too?
Yeah. I just the other day with my husband, I was doing something and then he's like, well, tell me if you need my help. And I said, I will tell you if I need your help. And he was like, okay, like, are you asking for my help? And I was like, no, I don't want your help. Like, and then later I was just like, okay, maybe I do need your help. But like I was in, a funky place and I was just like, no, I do need to ask for help right now. Like,
it can be hard to admit. Yes.
Yeah.
So tell me about what you're doing now to help, but you're starting a course, right?
Yeah, so it's going to be just like it's super low key. It's nothing crazy. It's just going to be like 4 sessions. So we're going to do like those pieces we were talking about. So it's called Empowered Empath. We're just going to meet 4 times. It's going to be July 11th and no, 11th. I don't know. I have to look at my thing. I think it's the 11th and 12th and then the next weekend. Now I'm like, what are my dates? I have them written down. Anyway, so we're going to do, like focusing on those pieces that we were talking about, right? So like your story around it, like what does that mean? Like really diving deeper and like getting an awareness for like what's going on in your mind and like what is the story you tell yourself and like how does that impact you going through your day to day, right? Because it's like if I have a story that every time I go to Target, I'm going to feel completely drained and then I'm going to be wiped out for the rest of the day. Like, what do you think is going to happen when I go to Target? That's exactly what's going to happen when I go to Target, right? Like, it doesn't mean it's not true, but it's like, we just want to know, like, what is our story around, like, all these different things. So the first class, we're going to look at, like, the story, and then we're going to dive into more of, like, that discernment, like, grounding, really, like, talking about boundaries. We're really going to get into, like, taking on other people's stuff. And like really diving deep on that, and then like some practices for like cleaning up and calling back your energy. And then I'll have like a lot of like tools and practices that people can implement like in their daily lives. Because I think it's like we live in a world where so many people don't want to feel. And I think part of like there's so many people who feel a lot. And so it's like for us to be able to like harness that and move forward in like an embodied, empowered way rather than feeling like overwhelmed and anxious. I feel like when we can like harness it and move forward in that way, then it's like that kind of stuff is like what tips the, like the pendulum a little bit, when we can really like be like, it's okay to feel things, because so many people don't want to feel things. That's why we're in a lot of the pickles that we're in this world.
Right.
Yeah. And then the last day is just we're gonna do a lot of like clearing work around like what comes up for people, because like a lot of people do feel like they have to like hide their sensitivities, or they do feel overwhelmed just like going out and going grocery shopping or whatever it is, whatever pieces that somebody feels like they need to work on around it. That's what the last day is going to be. And yeah, so okay, I got the dates. It's the 16th, 17th, and then the 23rd and 24th. And then there will be replays for it. And I'm actually doing a flash sale right now, so it's only $67. So it's super
super affordable.
I know. I wanted to make it like really affordable for people right now, because I feel like so many people really need the work, and to like be able to feel like okay with where they are, because I do know a lot of people who want to step out and do maybe more like spiritual work or like more healing work, but it's like if you don't have the practices in place, then you can feel really drained. And I mean, because you work like with people in like that capacity, and so it's like if you don't have like that practice, then it can be a lot.
Yeah, it really does help. And it does help when you learn just how to feel your own emotions versus others. I mean, just everything. I love everything that you do, and just identifying like I loved when, and you're like you said earlier, you would tell people, but how do you feel? And they would give you words, and you're like, no, but where do you feel it in your body? And just, I think I do physical therapy. I see people all the time. They have no clue what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You'll tell them to breathe, and they've been holding their breath. I am breathing. They're not breathing, but they have no awareness, or their shoulders are here. And they have no awareness that they're here. When you ask people, where do you feel it in your, I had a patient, he did a somatic therapy. He was telling me about it. And he was like, she started asking me where I felt it in my body, and I had no idea what she was saying. Like, what do you mean? He thought she was crazy. It took him a while, but when people finally get it, it's like it's been there all along. We've been taught to ignore it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. We've been like taught for sure, like disconnect from that like all the time. So the more you disconnect from it, then you're like, I don't even know what that is. Like I have people sometimes who tell me like, oh, I don't feel anything. And I'm like, really? Really? Is that true? Because then we like jump into it and I'm like, well, let's see about that. And then I ask them questions, and then they're like, oh, wow, I actually guess I am feeling things. I'm like, yeah, you are.
Right. It's just this disconnect between the awareness of it. And what is trauma? Trauma is a disconnection from the self. I would argue we're all traumatized. We're all walking.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
we are.
God, if it's like a funeral, somebody dies and you get a day off. If it's a close family member, you get 3 days off, and then you better get back to work and be good. It's like, that is not how we're designed to be. Like, you get weepy at work, it should be okay. Like, don't get me wrong.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
You shouldn't be able to, you should, go to work and bring all your problems all the time. But it's like, there are times when I think we need to be allowed to be human.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I could say so much about this. Like, this is like a whole nother, yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. Because just like with that, we think like there's so many, I think, things that we want to pathologize with people, and it's actually like a trauma response. And like that's something that I learned with like my husband, when doctors couldn't tell us like what was going on, and I was like, well, maybe it's this, and they're like, no, that doesn't have any correlation. I'm like, no, I think it does. Like, and so just what I've seen over the years, like I know for sure that so much of what is like showing up for people is a response to like the traumas that they've gone through. And so it's like hard because we're dealing with a society, right, that like doesn't see that, and even in like the medical world. And so like that can feel like a lot. But I think that the tides are turning. and that people are becoming much more aware, and like so many more doctors are getting like trauma informed and everything like that. And so
it's turning.
So I feel like a lot better for where we're going with that. And
right. And I think too, what you were saying about I do this, I get to where I start to talk and then I forget.
That's okay.
Your course is great because you're just giving people, what I've learned is that when people don't get my sensitivity, I no longer take it personally. So if I'm upset or crying or whatever, they're like, oh, I'm just like, okay, well, they're just not sensitive.
Yeah.
Well, they're not in tune with their stuff and that's how they live. But that doesn't mean I can't be the way that I am. I accept myself anyway.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. You need some people that get it, but I do have some people that get it. I have this community and my husband and my kids and friends. And so you have a social circle, but you don't have to be, when they don't get it, you see it for what it is, as opposed to taking it as, oh, there's something defective or wrong with me. So that's why I like your course, is because you're going to give people the tools just to recognize and empower themselves to feel and to honor those feelings and to feel good about who they are, as opposed to letting, because highly sensitives, Elaine Aron, the one that coined the phrase, 20% of the population. So you have 80% of the population walking around that doesn't get it. So you're going to come into contact with a lot more people that don't get it than do. But when you get it and you feel good about it, you no longer need their permission to be who you are, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like the most beautiful place you can be in, is when you don't need permission from anybody and you don't need validation from anything on the outside.
Yes.
Like when you feel solid and like you have that for yourself, like you're sailing, you know?
Yes. And you have it. I love how you said when you talk to the doctors and they're like, no, no, no. Well, what have we learned? They're doctors. They went to school all this time. They know more than we do. They don't always. I've been in medical field 20 years. I've met some great ones. I've met some not so great ones. It's not always about that. There's a lot of things that, textbook is good for certain things, but sometimes intuition and there's just a knowing,
Yeah.
And I think being a highly sensitive, you did pick up on the things and you were putting them together in your subconscious and you knew there was something else. But a lot of times people don't want to listen to you because they know more,
sure.
And so when you know and you trust your own gut and don't let people talk you out of it, I mean, it's just a wonderful place to be.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, this is awesome. So is there anything else you want to share? $67. It's going to be the 16th, the 17th, the 23rd, and the 24th. So 2 weekends. Yeah.
So if you buy it before July 2nd, then it's $67. And then they'll be recorded, and I'm going to make the recordings like downloadable so that people like they can go back to the practices, because I think that's really important. So yeah.
And
that's, you can sign up on my website, which is Hilary with 1 L, Anthony.com. And then you'll see a little thing that says Empowered Empath, like at the top of the website, and you can sign up for it there. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I'll post a link with the video so everybody can see where to find you.
Awesome.
And then I'll send it to you too as well, so you can post it.
All right. Thanks so much, Jessica. It was so good to connect with you again.
Connect with you. Let's do it again soon.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.